Hi, you are listening to Mediation Station, and this is your host, Greg Fenton. Each week, we explore topics and ideas related to the experience of people with conflict and look to promote the profession of conflict resolvers. We are available to connect with at fentonmediation@gmail.com and at 647-227-4734. Visit us at our Facebook page to like us and Facebook group page to become a member. Also visit the YouTube channel called Fenton Mediation. Listen to podcasts of Mediation Station shows on SoundCloud, Apple Podcasts, and Google Podcasts. Please follow us at our Twitter account at Fenton Mediation. The conversation today is titled, How Safe is Mediation for Separating Families? And with me are the threesome of Barbara Landau, Marianne Popescu, and Jim Fitch. All will be with me very shortly. We continue to present the program live each Sunday night from 8 to 9 p.m. through Zoom. We will engage in conversation with everyone attending, able to listen and watch. Microphones and webcams will be closed. If anyone wants to contribute, there are two options. One is to see the chat icon as a bubble at the bottom center of your screen for you to click to then type in a comment or question and click to send. Or you can click on the reactions icon that is also on the bottom center of your screen for us to see. Click on the hand icon within for us to see that you want to speak, and we will open your mic only for you to share your comment or question and then close your mic again. The show is being recorded for you, both for video and audio purposes, and will be available for public access on SoundCloud, Apple Podcasts, and Google Podcasts, in addition to being uploaded to Fenton Mediation, the YouTube channel, and however else others want to share it. That's all for everybody to benefit from. So as I mentioned just a little bit before, joining me for a conversation on the topic of how safe is mediation for separating families are Barbara Landau, Marianne Popescu, and Jim Fitch. Welcome to the program and the show tonight, each of you.
Nice to be here.
Thanks, Greg.
All right, I appreciate this is first time doing a multi-party Zoom program session. And so hopefully it's going to work well, as I believe. You guys are all experienced individuals with Zoom. So how about each of you share one thing about yourself that you believe no one knows about you? Let's start with Barbara.
Oh, okay. Well, I'm going to say that for my 50th birthday, I rafted the length of the Grand Canyon, and then I upped the ante for my 60th, and I rafted the Zambezi River in Zimbabwe, which was considerably more difficult.
So you're only like 61. I understand that. Okay.
I don't even know why I even mentioned that, because of course I'm not yet 60, but it's an aspiration.
Oh, sorry if I said you're 61. We'll edit that out after.
Okay, that's okay.
How about you, Marianne?
I wanted to be a midwife. That was one of my career goals and aspirations. I thought that, and I still think about it, and I just really admire the skills of midwifery and frontline service workers.
So it begs the question from my point of view, how come you didn't go there and you transitioned into what you are doing?
You know what? I think I didn't know enough about it, and I didn't have any role models in that area. And I think I was more drawn to law in high school. And so this sort of branched off from that. I actually I started off my undergraduate wanting to be a marriage and family therapist. So this was another diversion, but midwifery was something I was really drawn to and think about all the time.
Some people have more than one career. There's still time.
There is still time. Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. And Jim, what about you? What do we don't know about you, Jim?
Go with the career aspirations piece, I suppose. I always wanted to be a professional wrestler. And I moved to Japan to do that.
Wow.
And 6 months later, when it was clear that I was, what's the word, terrible, or
I thought you
terrible,
were going to say terrified.
or terrible. Oh no, the courage piece was never the problem. The raw skills just were lacking, and it's nice to be home, as it were, 30 years later, and honestly, I frequently feel like a wrestling referee, so I'm always expecting that sooner or later I'm going to take a chair shot to the back.
So that wasn't sumo wrestling, was it?
It was not, no, but there were people training sumo in the same academy.
Okay, all right.
So speaking of domestic violence, here we are.
Yeah.
All right. So what do you see for each of you as your intention when working with people? Let's start with Marianne this time.
To make their lives better and to help them adjust through the changes they're going through, and to really focus on how they're going to work out their future relationship, regardless of children, not children, just how they're going to go through the world, having had this really beautiful meeting relationship, and to transition to a different understanding of what that relationship was, to help them go on to the next chapter.
Okay. Mr. Jim.
I couldn't have put it any more eloquently than that, or even close to as eloquently. So that's about it. I do hope that after providing some services to families, they're able to understand that they're not perhaps as far apart as they may have thought they were when they first arrived.
Okay. Barbara, you've had a long history, so
I've had a long history. I gave that away. Marianne talked about the intention as her goal overall. And I think that for me, children are really central to the process. So my intention, if they have children, and most of the people coming to see me had children, was to focus on their kids. And I have them bring a picture of their children for the first meeting. And I have them put that so that the children are facing them. And I talk about how what we're going to do is going to be to focus on making their lives better, making it, at least lowering the conflict, making it easier for them. And I also hope that when they come in, they often come in mad. And I intentionally want them to walk out feeling sad. So I find that sad is a lot more manageable than mad, and to reflect on the situation. And I think if I had to add one more thing, to think about the fact that any plan that they make should be something that's actually livable for their children. It should be something that their children can look forward to. And that I ask them to think, if your parents were making a plan for you at their separation, how would you feel about the plan? Would this be something you'd be prepared to go along with? Because often they make up plans that are making, I can't see them making any sense to actually having children go through them. But I ask them to think about something that will work for their kids. That's it.
Yeah, and having the children's photos there is a right in your face type of context for them to be informed. You know, my experience is that many times individuals as couples come together, they're focused on each other, and they lose sight, or they don't even have insight as to why they're there, which is about creating family dynamics.
It's actually such a powerful thing. When they walk in and they've each brought a picture, they try to compete. My picture is more recent than your picture. And so what I ask them to do is to make a plan for sharing their pictures. And how can they make sure that when the children are spending time with each of them, they see themselves in each home. So that's it.
Yeah, and an experience for me from my community mediation days with the picture, the photo, this was about neighbors with each other. And there was an autistic child who was in their 20s, and he was reacting all the time to the dog that was living next door with the older couple. And so we brought the older couple and the young man and his parents into the room, and the parents, well, the older couple with the dog, they brought their photo of the dog, and we put that on the table. Why we here? So that's a great technique and strategy in terms of helping people to be connected to their purpose and their intention, and to help you support them along their journey. What type of approach do each of you practice in terms of doing your work with people to mediate? Let's start with you, Jim. What's your approach?
I mean, it can be very variable, can't it, everyone, right? A lot of it's going to depend on the family that are in front of us and their very particular experiences. So I think flexibility is a key part of process design, because, as I say, everybody's got a plan until they get hit in the face. And I've found that a certain degree, a certain degree of flexibility and certainly trying to learn from these surprises has been really useful. So do I plan? Absolutely. Do I have expectations? Absolutely. Am I frequently surprised? Yes. And I probably learn more from families than the other way around. And that's as it's supposed to be, I think. So.
Do you see yourself, though, as a template for the people that you're working to support, to mediate, as being something that would be helpful for them to connect with too?
In terms of familiarity, sure. I think everybody has certain commonalities of experience, but I find that we all learn probably more from differences than we do from those similarities, right? I mean, just even in conversation today, I learn more from people that disagree with me about something than I'd ever learn from someone that already, shares my opinions. How useful is that? That becomes an echo chamber, right?
Yeah, I think we want to be provoked from where our safe space is at some point to go to our vulnerabilities many times. Barbara, what's your perspective of how you approach things?
Well, I think when I'm going to take maybe a slightly different tack. When people are going through a separation, they feel very vulnerable. They often feel like their world has just been kind of broken apart, and they don't see how the pieces are going to fit together. They're very kind of caught in the moment, sort of deer in a headlight. Most people, not everybody. Some people are further along. So I want, first of all, for them to calm down, for them to feel that I'm going to listen to them, that I'm going to respect their perspective. And I think a priority for me is that they feel safe in whatever process we're going to go into. Also that they see that this is going to be a reassuring process. It's going to be a process that is going to build from where they're coming from and with the kinds of issues they're most concerned about. I have to also make sure that they know right from the outset that I'm going to be equally concerned about both parties. I'm not going to be taking sides. I'm going to be actively listening to both of them. And that because I listen to the other person doesn't mean that I like them any less. But that I want them to feel reassured, heard, respected, and safe.
Yeah, and they have to connect with, not only what we're saying, it's how we're saying it, how our nonverbal cues are also being presented as well. Marianne, what's your perspective of your approach?
I share a lot of what Jim and Barbara have said. So I'll say something that I say in training, which is show up, be curious, don't work too hard, and never give up. And that's my approach in a very nice way. I say those to sort of make us laugh and think about that, showing up just means being right here, being present, and giving all of my attention, regardless of what's going on in my life or what's happening. I want to be there for them, and all of my compassion and care is with them at that moment for that session. Be curious is I'm interested in knowing what makes them tick. What's happening for them? What do they need? don't work too hard, is really believing in their capacity to make decisions and that they're the experts of their own lives. If I'm feeling I'm working too hard to come up with a solution or figure something out for them, I try to slow down and stop pedaling the bike, and allow them to pedal the bike. And never give up speaks to the process. So design the process to fit the family. Slow down when you have to. Shuttle mediation. Stop to get therapy, an expert or something. And that's sort of the part of never give up. Just always think like, what else can I bring in? What other resource can I bring in to help this family? That's sort of a tongue-in-cheek approach, but I thought I would share that because my colleagues have said everything else is wonderful.
It sounds like Marianne the midwife.
Yes.
You're not the one you're not giving birth, but you're standing by and supporting.
Exactly.
Well, also you're
exactly
creating conditions for providing the space for the family to give birth to a new renewal of a co-parenting relationship in some way.
Oh my goodness, how wonderful. I've realized my second career already. It's done.
I think we may have transitioned you into another space that connects more deeply with who you are, nevertheless. Yeah. So tonight, today we're going to focus our conversation on the context of families, separation, mediation, and safety. What is the connection of safety and mediation? Barbara, you want to go first?
Okay, well, mediation is something that happens in private, and it's about people in private negotiating what ends up being a legal agreement. And so the safety part of it is kind of multifaceted. It means that we have to be sure that people are actually showing up voluntarily. They're not there, being forced into the process. Also, that they are both emotionally and they're competent intellectually to negotiate. So the competence emotionally is that, if they're just reeling from having found out about the separation, they may not be ready. They may need a period of counseling in order to be emotionally ready. So emotionally ready, but also there may be a real disparity between the couple in terms of their competence to understand the issues. So there may need to be some kind of a process to help one party get better informed, some sidebars in order to be ready. And I need to know that any agreement that's being reached is being reached voluntarily. It's not a take it or leave it. Either you take what I'm offering you or guess what? So mediation is happening in a private context, but we need to be sure that all of the elements of a valid contract are being considered. So it has to be with voluntary, without duress, has to be informed. All of those elements that would make a valid contract are the same elements that we need for a mediated agreement to stand up.
Well, let me clarify though, because I don't look through my lens as contracts amongst people. It's more, the understandings that they've created in a space, in a place that is about self-determination, I guess, with the context of safety and what that means in self-determination and self-empowerment, so that people are, quote, provided the conditions to feel trusting of each other in addition to the process. And yeah, we go into the unpacking the bag of what's the experience, the lived experience that brought people to this place, because safety connotes for me, and the purpose of why we're doing mediation is that people have gone through a range of lived experiences. And some of those lived experiences in relation to that other person in the room may not have been healthy and productive. And we'll unpack that more.
Yeah.
So, Marianne, what's your perspective of safety and mediation and the relationship with the two concepts?
I'll say what my teacher Barbara told me is safety trumps everything. And, you know, when you're mediating, safety is always your number one concern, right? It is, if we don't have safety, we have very little else. So I think that the idea of, you know, the OIFM standard of continuous screening in mediation for safety concerns, power imbalance is a really good point to remember, that mediators don't only just screen once and have that be finished and over. It's an ongoing assessment. Things change between sessions. Checking in at the beginning of a session, you know, has anything changed? And I think Barbara might remember, like I was really, as an early mediator, was concerned about spending people's money. And, you know, Barbara's like, well, try it without it and see what happens, or some, you know, and I was like, oh, okay, this is why. And that lesson that she taught me made, it just stuck in my head. And there was one couple where they were an older couple, they had fertility problems for about, you know, 15, 20 years, finally were getting separated, and they were so nice. They absolutely loved each other, had each other's back, everything was good. And a safety concern popped up in between that, had I not done that check-in, I wouldn't have guessed that was going to happen, and it changed the entire mediation. So this was a nice eye-opener for me, that even when things are perfect, beautiful, and look like they're going to be smooth for the entire mediation, that ongoing check-in and screening is so important. So thanks to my mentor, Barbara, for that one. Kept me helping my class.
And I think too, it's your curiosity, because you're using your active listening skills to what's being said, what's communicated, the behaviors that you see, to then be curious about what hasn't been said, or what hasn't been presented, or some of the catchwords that people say that we tap into, that could be, oh, you just mentioned about this. And that could unpack a whole wealth of possibilities that might reveal concerns with control, power, safety concerns overall, right? Jim,
exactly, yeah.
Well, I'd like to drill down in something that Marianne brought up a couple of questions ago, when she was talking about one of the pieces that she might use in an introduction. She talks about people perhaps not wanting to work too hard. I think there's always a risk in everything except safety that we as mediators might end up working harder than the clients, and that's likely something that we have to, as reflective practitioners, acknowledge. Maybe this isn't actually the process that they want, but maybe it's something that I'm cheerleading for more than is appropriate. Where safety is concerned, though, there's no such thing as us working too hard. We cannot work too hard. I find that if my spider sense is going off, there's probably a reason. And that doesn't mean that you have to take active interventions, right? You don't have to go out and say, hey, you know, I'm worried that she sexually assaulted you last week. How useful is that? There may be times where that's exactly what you have to say, but I find that's extremely unlikely to be particularly helpful. But you have to do something. You can never work hard enough when it comes to safety. And that's not just about ensuring safety for safety planning. It's not just, being constantly vigilant for changes of power, because as any seasoned mediator in particular knows, the power in any relationship is not usually static, right? We all have these like black and white, well, mom's got a master's degree and dad's got grade 10, so mom has all the power. Or mom is 5 feet tall and dad is 6'2", so dad has all the power. These black and white simplistic pieces, they're not very helpful usually. But we can never work too hard to watch those flowing dynamics. And a lot of my mentors and my most trusted colleagues will say, you've got to be careful, slow down, don't work too hard in the mediation process. But I'd say where safety is concerned, it's an exception to that. I said, spider sense goes off, you got to do something. I don't know what it is, and it's going to vary every time.
I
Oh,
agree with you wholeheartedly, Jim. I think that the concept of not working too hard, tongue in cheek, is empowering clients to make their own decisions and a self-determination piece. Not, and we may be working very, very hard and it not looking like we're doing a lot, but we're asking these key questions. So there's don't work too hard is very tongue in cheek. And those of you who know me will know that that's my, that's my MO. I might even use the word be nosy instead of be curious. It's just my way of sort of adding levity to a very difficult, serious topic that helps me to connect with my clients. And I will always work hard and show up for clients of all types and of all safety levels, for sure.
what I learned taking on that, don't work too hard. It's not that. It's don't work harder than the clients in ways that, you're looking for their active participation. If you don't get it, then you say, okay, why is it not happening for this person or that person? Maybe probe and then try to get some insight as to what's happening. Though ownership rests with the individuals. I mean, we control creating a process, facilitating a process as mediators within that space. How can you control safety outside of your process?
Oh, is that a question?
Yeah, it's an open-ended question. So you wanna contribute? That's absolutely.
Sure, I'll jump in. I think that all of this discussion has been really stimulating lots of good ideas. I think that one of the things we need to be very conscious of about domestic violence is that until very recently, it was a topic that no one wanted to talk about. And certainly the statistics show that it was a rare event for particularly a woman, but it could be a man, but it most often is a woman, revealing that they had experienced domestic violence because of cultural pressures, because of feeling that they'd be ostracized from their family, that it wasn't okay to share, your dirty laundry outside the family. It was very rare for people to disclose, and they did a lot to cover up. And one of the things I really worry about is people who come to us in mediation who are still living under one roof. And very often I found that my clients who are victims of domestic violence didn't drive, and they would be driven to the session and driven away from the session and living under one roof. And so when you talk about being conscious, they would have to weigh at every moment whether they revealed that they were victims of domestic violence, because what could they do about it? And one of my favorite sayings, Marianne will recognize this one, is there's a reasonable reason for unreasonable behavior. So when somebody, it seems, is being quite unreasonably stuck on reaching an agreement about something, or their behavior just doesn't add up, I don't understand what's going on there, my radar goes up, and it's time for me to have an individual conversation with each of them, not just with one of them, each of them. And what I wanted to say is, as both culturally, it's become okay to talk about domestic violence, and as mediators have made it an absolute requirement to talk about it. If we are really comfortable asking questions from a place of wanting to reassure and make somebody feel that it's safe to talk to us, I find the reaction is that people are so happy to have someone open the lid, take the cork out of the bottle, and have a conversation, because they most often would say to me, it's the first time I'm talking about this to anybody, because it feels like a personal shame. What did I do to deserve or create this situation? So I think one of the things mediators can do really well is make it a safe space to use your gut, and if something doesn't seem to be adding up, to make a safe place to have a private conversation and ask directly about it. Ask it from a caring place. Don't ask it as just a nosy, I know Marianne is not nosy, place, but from a place of, I really care about you. And I really need to know if you're okay, because it's important for everybody to be okay. And I find that that's something that mediation does that very few processes do. There aren't many lawyers that have that conversation with their clients, and no judges that I know have that conversation with their clients. Most processes that we've relied on as traditional have avoided you don't want to know that your client may be a perpetrator or, or even a victim. It doesn't seem to feel right. Or it's not a conversation you're comfortable with. But we've made it a very comfortable conversation for mediators. We've made it an essential conversation.
I think we feel that, and I'm not speaking for everyone, though, I think a number of people feel as mediators, part of us is about intentionally going into the feelings. Because with the feelings, that's a form of expression of something that's happened or is happening. And to tap into that in an active listening manner, to probe that, to pull it out, I think we can gain much insight about that. So for our conversation, we're focusing on separating families, not necessarily just families. It's at the point of separation. So what is it about separation that provokes for any of you some concern or any concern? Well, Jim, go ahead.
Thank you. First, let's begin with the obvious thing that we can all agree on, and that really any mediator worth her or his salt knows, which is that the time of separation is a particularly dangerous time indeed. Honestly, in some respects, for everyone going through a separation statistically, but particularly for victims of intimate partner violence. If someone has experienced a pattern of IPV, certainly the first 90 days, as they say, after a separation event can be an extremely dangerous time for her or for him, pardon me, but generally speaking, we are talking about female persons in this situation.
Let me just clarify too, for the broader context, IPV, intimate partner violence.
Pardon me, yes, sorry, intimate partner violence. I don't like using the phrase domestic violence. There's nothing domestic about it. Domesticity is an inherent positive to me, so I don't use that word, but that's just my personal choice, and others disagree. So if we know that 90 days, so to speak, or certainly the time of separation, can be particularly dangerous for persons who have experienced IPV, we have to do something about that as reflective and recognition-based practitioners. Does that mean that we are paralyzed? No. Absolutely not. I don't like the idea that do no harm should be in our toolbook. We've talked about this before, Greg. It's kind of ludicrous. The only way to do no harm is to do nothing, which is utter paralysis, and ironically will almost invariably do people harm. I think every mediator ought to toss that well-intentioned phrase out the window. By the way, it doesn't begin the Hippocratic Oath anyway, and the Hippocratic Oath was never intended for this sort of intervention, and every physician and nurse violates the Hippocratic Oath every single day of their practice. Let's lose do no harm. To minimize harm, which is our ultimate goal when we're talking about safety, right? Because you said earlier, how can we control for
outside of our process?
Right, and then the answer is we can't, but there are degrees of everything. Perhaps we can't control. Can we manage? Maybe a little more than control. Can we influence or impact upon, though? Absolutely, 100% we can. And it's going to be those early interventions, I find in the case particularly where you're dealing with a family which has experienced IPV in the past, those early interventions, when some of our colleagues might be concerned about doing no harm, the steps that we take, well, they carry risk, like everything else in life, can lead to the very best outcomes, not just for the person or persons in a dynamic that may have experienced or been victimized by some form of trauma, whether it's IPV or something else, but indeed for a person who might have perpetrated it. Or, and this is something that gets forgotten all the time, people that aren't perpetrators, they're not victims, but they're bystanders, observers, and those people are so often children. And as Barbara said so well at the beginning, child-focused family mediation is elite level work if we can do it right. And those early steps, early interventions when we're concerned about post-separation IPV can really, in the long term, help those children in their capacity as observers, bystanders, members of this family forever. We cannot control for risk. We can, to a certain degree, manage risk, but we can certainly have an impact on it. And I always pray and hope that impact is a positive one.
Marianne, something you want to contribute about the point of separation for a couple?
Yeah, I think mediators are part of a larger group of people that are working together to help people who are experiencing violence. And I think that, there's a good focus in training on making excellent referrals to services that where there are experts, Assaulted Women's Helpline, someone there, a mediator doesn't have to make a safety plan if they don't have capacity to do that. And the knowing who's in your community and knowing the resources that are there is a key component to a mediator's toolbox in order to pull out and I mean, I can't tell you how many times the Assaulted Women's Helpline, I've been so impressed with their work. They assess for risk. They do ongoing monitoring with families to, really help them to assess what their next steps should be. And I don't feel I have capacity as a family mediator to be able to make that assessment. So I bring in people to the mediation, and like Barbara had taught me, to make that call with the person in your office and to make that a warm referral and not just throw a bunch of numbers out on a huge list of paper that 5 are out of date and, one doesn't exist. And, you need the current, call Maria at this number. I've spoken to her before, and I know that it's really scary, to think of calling. What if we called together? Would that help? And that's something I think that mediators focus on a lot. We don't try to do it all. And I think that that's a very special skill that family mediators share.
Barbara?
I just wanted to add that if you're doing your screening for domestic violence and you learn that somebody is at risk, you are no longer mediating, most likely. You are most likely no longer going to be the mediator. And so sometimes people think that, mediators are always neutral and impartial. But no, your first obligation is to be sure that people are safe. So when Marianne said that if somebody were to disclose that actually they are in an unsafe situation, helping that person call is an important thing. I've also gotten in the car and driven them to, the Barbara Schleifer Clinic or wherever, in order to be sure that they did not, the typical thing with family doctors is that people may go 25 times around before they actually either disclose or actually take action on the fact that they are at risk. And I think it's because somebody gives them advice and then leaves them to figure out what to do next. But I think that if we discover that somebody is at risk, I think we have an obligation to do something. Now, that doesn't mean that we don't do something with the other person as well. We can't just assume that if this person either packs up and leaves and goes to a shelter or whatever, we can't just leave that other person with no intervention. And so I will meet with that other person and I will do a different kind of interview than I've done. I'm not going to disclose this person just told me that, they're a victim of domestic violence and whatever, but I will have a conversation with them about how they're feeling about the separation, talk to them about what might be constructive ways that they could deal with how they're feeling about it, and help them get connected to some help for them so that they feel understood, heard, not put down or blamed. It's not going to help the woman, it's not going to help the family, but try to figure out ways of putting some containment and some, I might need to do some reality checking with them, that if they disclose that there've been examples of, I lost my temper and I hit her and I realized I shouldn't have, and I'm not going to happen again. I might want to do a reality check with them about why it's in their interest for that not to happen again, and why it would be so helpful to them if they were to get some help with how to deal with their feelings in a better way, because looking down the road, they are going to want a relationship with their ex that allows them to continue to parent their children. And I'm going to hold out some carrots for them to actually take advantage of some constructive action.
Yeah, I mean, it's about providing supports, we'll say, in different ways to the different people involved in the process. And just because something's happened that presents that something else is happening, and you support the person who's been harmed in some way, it's not to say at all that the person who may be at fault for causing the harm or providing the harm, they need supports too in a different way. So
could I just add one quick thing? And that is that most often, not always, sometimes the people who cause harm are, monsters, really scary, terrible people. But very often those people, I call them my shattered children. They are people who've probably grown up in an abusive family themselves. They probably have had experiences witnessing a parent being abusive most often, and also that they may be a victim of abuse themselves, and they may see themselves as having improved on their own personal family situation and kind of want some credit for that. But I'm not necessarily going to give them credit for being a little less abusive. But the thing is, they really react well to feeling understood and realizing that they are continuing a pattern that they didn't want for themselves and they don't want for their children. But getting them to a point where they would accept some little bit of rationale for why they should get some help, not necessarily taking full, it's not going to happen in a minute that they take responsibility, but at least see why it would be in their interest to do something different than what has gotten them into a marriage breakdown.
Okay, so as of Jim's mouth's open, that presents to me a positive for sure. Let's just transition, and then you can find a way to input whatever you're going to present. As of March 1st, 2021, Divorce Act and other related provincial statutes changed. How's it changed with regard to violence and mediation, those concepts? Whoever of the three. Jim, you want to go first here?
Sure. I think it actually, there are some challenges that are posed here for mediators under the new law. I'll say as a preamble that I strongly disagreed with two things that Barbara said in her last,
Okay.
in her last piece, and it relates. So I'll use them. I disagreed very much, as you know, Barbara, with the idea that we will probably not mediate for that family. I think we probably will and probably should, perhaps not right away, perhaps after appropriate other interventions are made. But as I always say, if she's not going to do this, what's she going to do? And we had in chat an excellent point that a lot of mediators, when they terminate mediation.
Do you want to read it? I was going to read it. So you want to read it?
Well, as long as I have have Eva's permission to do this.
Yeah. It's understood that when people type, it's part of the conversation.
Okay, thank you. And from who says, I understand that for many families where there's a risk of or where there is IPV present, it may not be suitable for mediation. And again, it might not be, but I think it usually is. Sometimes I'm troubled to find that often the instruction for mediators is to refer these families to the court system or to lawyer-led negotiation. And it goes on talking about how, as I had said, mediation's a lot safer for this family. I don't know, 4 out of 5 times. So there's the idea of where else is she going to go? My second disagreement with with Barbara comes back to that. I think, Barbara, you made a potentially risky assumption when you said that when you spoke to the other person, that you would conduct a very different meeting. Well, it probably will end up that way, but we don't know that. And if I have who I'll call, parent number 1, just for interest's sake, reporting IPV, even significant, even long-term control IPV, I will certainly take appropriate steps with that person. I will certainly provide additional supports with more useful providers than myself. That being said, I'm going to begin my intake session with parent number 2 and conduct as much of it as possible exactly the same way as I did with parent number 1. I think an essential part of our curiosity is not making assumptions based on one person's intake about what's really going on, because I'm saying we are ensuring her safety no matter what. But that doesn't necessarily mean that everything, was brought down on tablets from the mountain. But they may both be abusing each other violently, sexually, financially, socially, verbally. It takes 2 to tango some of the time, so I'm not prepared to make an automatic assumption that there's one victim and one perpetrator in these circumstances. Hurt people, as Barbara said very well and better than I ever could. But often the people that find themselves in these relationships one way or the other have come from such a pattern of familial abuse, often transgenerational abuse, that it's possible that it's a reciprocal cycle of violence. And I want to make sure, and I'm going to call parent number 2 him this time, that if parent number 2 is a victim of intimate partner violence from parent number 1, even though he may also be a perpetrator of that he also receives safety planning and support in his capacity as a victim, or in parent number 2's capacity as a victim, because that person could certainly be a female person as well. I would not conduct radically different intakes until I had a reason to. That being said, if I heard what Barbara heard from that hypothetical person, I would definitely be doing exactly what she said.
Well, I think part of the point too is that we're to be connected continuously in the process with the individuals with whom we're engaging and supporting. And we have to do what we feel in our best interest too, as mediators, because we do have a purpose to serve and we have a process to facilitate. And also we want to be safe in addition to the parties being safe. So these are to raise to the conscious level. When these things are communicated or we become aware of them, what do we do with that information? And then we have to see how we adapt to the circumstance, the situation with those people. Mm-hmm. In terms of Barbara or Marianne, you want to say anything?
It struck me a little bit that, to bring up the point of that we're not fact finders, right? We're not looking for to determine what the facts are in any given scenario. So I'm more definitely aligned with Barbara in I'm going to do a different intake because I've got information and I'm not trying to prove or disprove it. It's just, I'm going to be a little bit more nuanced in some of the words that I choose, and I may have safe termination in my mind, in order to help someone even temporarily move into a different sort of space for whatever they need. And then if they come back to mediation and they're ready and everyone's feeling like they have capacity to do so. But I do think, though, that it changes the flavor. And, you know, you don't, the one of the beautiful things about being a mediator is you don't have to figure it out. You accept all information as given, as their truth, and moving on to what you would do and how you would design the process with their truth on both sides of the scenario, for sure.
And I'd say too that, you know, we're trying to provide a space that people can self-determine for themselves, being mindful of the various factors that impact people having the capacity to comprehend that concept of self-determination and make conscious decisions that they want to make for themselves relative to when you ask them, what do you want? Well, whatever they want. I mean, for me, that's a cue that there's more to unpack with that person. Yes, Barbara.
Yeah, I'm going to be very quick because I agree with everybody, and always it depends on the individual situation. I want to make it clear that I don't think that in most cases that court is I don't think court is a safer alternative. I don't know of any cases where people have been killed as a result of mediation, but certainly they have been because in court there isn't really anybody doing the kind of in-depth screening that we're doing, and there isn't. And the whole focus of court is writing affidavits that say what's wrong about the other person and looking to win against another person. And that whole dynamic just feeds into an abuser and enrages them. And so for those reasons, it feels like public shaming to abusers. It feels like a winner-take-all kind of situation, and mediation is a very different premise. And there are very few cases that I turn away from mediation. The cases that I was thinking about were when somebody has revealed to me that they've been at the hospital emergency room 17 times. They've had their collarbone broken. They've had their jaw broken. And nobody, because they're from an upper middle class family, nobody has asked what's happened. They've given stupid answers like I bumped into the wall or I tripped and fell or something like that. And because their partner was a CEO of a large company, nobody will ask. Now,
can I interject?
They can't.
Let me touch on, you said upper class or upper income family.
Yeah.
Why did you say those words
I
in
said
that context?
That because the assumption is they couldn't possibly be. It would be too embarrassing to ask that person about issues of domestic violence. We have all kinds of stereotypes in our mind about who is a victim of domestic violence and who isn't. And those stereotypes are just that. They are stereotypes. And so the particular case that I was thinking about was traumatic. Another one was where a woman had been a victim of abuse for 16 years. And when she raised the idea of separation, they were driving home from a meeting he insisted on for marriage counseling. And when she said, you know, I've been through a number of sessions now, I don't want to stay, he reached over and tried to push the door open and said, if you want to leave, why don't you leave now? It was at a point where I didn't do screening. This was years ago. And I learned about the domestic violence from interviewing the child. I'm not going to go into all of that, but when I sat down with her the next time after meeting with the child and discovered that she had hidden this because she was in an important job and she looked like a professional and she just wanted me to look over their agreement and get it done. And, you know, one week would be too much to get out the door. I didn't ask. I was intimidated by her. She looked so together. When I heard about it, I was not going to continue to negotiate. She was in a take it or leave it deal. Those are the kinds of things. That would I leave the door open in many cases, not all, but in many cases, certainly. for somebody to go through a period of recognition, take some action, be ready and come back. But you know, I'm talking about where somebody has risks to their life and limb. I'm not. Many cases are certainly suitable for a variety of methods of mediation. We can have shuttle mediation. We can have a supportive person in the hall or in the room. We can have the perpetrator, alleged perpetrator, come early and leave late. Make sure they don't travel together. Got all kinds of different ways that we can modify the process with much more creativity and flexibility than a court process, which must have people, you know, in court and you know, all the rules of civil procedure, uncivil procedure. Okay, I'm going to let you go on to the next thing.
So you know, what I drafted and I put together as questions.
Yeah.
I knew it would be much more than we could get to.
Yes.
And I feel that there's a wealth of untapped conversation still to happen. So, you know, I'm putting you on the spot. Maybe there's a part 2 to this so that we can create the focus to capture in some way a point here that makes sense, because what I heard from you guys is that assessing screening, and we say not to be judgmental, and the process is not judgmental. Are we not being judgmental? Because there's not going to be one way of assessing or screening the same situation by different mediators. Jim and I had this conversation somewhat in a previous show. Speak to it.
Remember, people call us neutral, but we're not neutral as to conduct. Right? I always tell my clients, this is your mediation, but it's in my house. Right now during COVID, it literally is from my end, but usually not. But, you know, this is your mediation in my house. I am not neutral as to conflict. Well, I'm also not neutral as to conflict because I'm trying to fix it, but and trying to reduce it, certainly. But I'm not neutral as to conduct, and I don't think any of us are. There are certain lines that we will not allow to be crossed in our process.
Marianne, what's your perspective? Thanks, Jim.
I'm thinking about Bernie Meyer and beyond neutrality, and just the idea that, you know, it's quite an interesting concept to me about neutrality and mediation. We're born to form opinions, gather information and data, and make assumptions and these sorts of things, or get our gut feeling. And these are actually life skills that we have. And so we are impartial to outcome. That's generally what we talk about. And the neutrality piece, I'm very much alive in terms of my opinion of things that happen. When I hear things that happen, they do affect me. I do think about them. But that has to be separate from the process design and the safety of the families, and just what are your next steps going to take. That part is the neutral actions that you take for the family, for the safety of the family.
Yeah, and as a mediator, if you're doing solo practice, everything's going to be filtered through your lens and your mindset and crafted according to that. What you see is being needed. You know, there's a comment from the crowd. This is where co-mediation comes in handy. Sometimes the co-mediator picks up on things or has a spider sense. I don't know if they corrected after Spidey sense, that the other doesn't. So it's great to have another pair of eyes. So the co-mediation model relative to the solo mediation model, you have that collaborative teamwork within that space. And one might see it a certain way and the other one will see it maybe another way. They're not supposed to be mimics of each other. They're supposed to be independent and autonomous, though working together as collaborators. Anybody? Go ahead, Barbara.
I'll just say that I almost always co-mediated because I would have mediation interns, which was my favorite thing. And as they got more comfortable and more confident, I would not only benefit from their insights, I'd benefit from their interventions. And I found it to be, a wonderful thing. It also allowed more flexibility, because if you got the sense that things were getting too heated, you could each speak with a client at the same time and not leave somebody out in the waiting room cooling their heels but not getting cool. So it gives you much more flexibility for your process.
Yeah, they're wondering what's going on in that room without me, and what's the mediator doing in there? Are they creating an alliance? Are they going to gang up on me? I mean, so many thoughts come to the mind of someone when they're struggling and they're going through these challenges in their world, in their life.
You can feel very, very alone when you're really alone, even if it's just for a bit. I mean, the good news is we have a very supportive community in family mediation in Ontario. I mean, I feel very confident knowing that I could pick up the phone, I can call Barbara. I could pick up the phone, I could call Marianne. I could pick up the phone, I could call Greg, and probably 20 other senior, talented, skilled mediators that I trust and respect that would take that kind of call. And I think we're very fortunate that way. I think we're very fortunate here.
So I know we're going into the midst of our transition to the nighttime. I want to put it out there to the world, the attendance, people in the bleacher seats. Anybody want to ask or make a comment that we could, process and reflect on and ponder? Putting you on the spot. We won't call out your name. Just you can make an anonymous contribution in some way or comment. Any thoughts? Well, there seems to be some energy for part two.
Okay, well, that
Sounds
sounds
good
good.
to me.
It's an
Yeah.
important topic, and I think that the more that we can do to educate the public about their options, about the fact that they have choices, and that they don't have to end up in an expensive, adversarial process that may take longer than they hoped it would. So, yeah.
One of the intentions for me is to unpack a lot of these concepts that are out there in the world that people don't generally always comprehend to the depths that they could be better informed about, that then could empower themselves with, as to the options and the opportunities that options present. And so, today we focused on safety and mediation, and I know we wanted to get more into conversation about the recent legislative changes with regard to some of these concepts of violence and mediation, and the strong encouragement that the system is supposed to now present for clients, and stakeholders are supposed to promote for clients to engage in mediation. And how does that, is that a matter of fact? You just go ahead to do that, or are there ethical concerns with that? It's not necessarily to answer that now. That's part of the conversation that we didn't get to, that I see as being a healthy opportunity in part two. How do you guys feel?
Sounds
Sounds
good.
great. Yeah.
I think,
Any minute spent with a present company is a minute well spent.
well, I'm going to add in one other topic for that conversation, and that is, what are some alternatives to court? Because people, mediation is one of them, but there are a number of different ways in which we can offer our services out of court to people. And there are some people who want to be in court, and by all means. But for those people who don't really want to be there, we're working on some creative options, and I'd love a chance to talk about them.
Yeah, sure. I'm totally open. And part of this was, do people get more risk with the new law? And this is not to answer now. Do people get put in a more riskier situation because of the new law and the encouragement to do mediation? Once they get into the system, they make a file, they make an application, and then stakeholders who don't necessarily have the training, the experience, the knowledge to deal with, quote, intimate partner violence concerns, abuse, control, and power dynamics, they're making decisions that will impact the family. So those are things to ponder. Anybody want to just, in closing in some way now, some thoughts, reflective?
It sounded like you were kind of mixing a few things as if they
I
were
am.
already in court.
Yeah.
I'm talking about a different process.
No, I'm just saying both dynamics. My whole purpose is to keep things out of court. I'm a community-based relational practitioner. Of course, there are some circumstances that the situation with particular people could benefit better by going through court. It's actually, for me, not to see court as the template or the default, the de facto process. It's out in the community as being where people retain ownership of the capacity to create their own outcomes. That's mine.
Okay, well.
All right. So any closing thoughts?
You got the last.
Well, I don't.
I think you got the last closing thought. You did very well.
Did very well.
So I see there's a question here. Are we stating the caucus is not a great idea? And she says we can call her name. That's Christiana.
I don't think we use the word caucus at all.
No. Yeah.
I'm not sure.
It's a great idea.
Clarify what she means.
I think if I can speak for Christiana, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, Christiana, is that when we meet privately with individuals, we didn't call it that, though I think she might be identifying when we meet. I'll meet with one person and I'll meet with the other one too. Because Barbara, you do reference that if you're going to have a private meeting, and that might be what she's defining as being the caucus. Nevertheless.
Caucus is a great idea.
I would use.
We just have to be nimble.
You have to do it. You have to make. Yeah. The thing about mediation is it's a little bit of improv.
Yes.
Yeah, and I totally. I had a show over a year ago about improvisational mediation. Yes, and rather than the concept of yes, but. So it's to build on that concept of creating the connection and the rapport and the trust. So a mediator is a person that is seen, from my view, as a person who creates trust amongst the parties because we represent something that they're hoping to create for themselves. And so we have to be the conduit in some way. Nevertheless.
Can I sneak a plug in?
It depends. Is it your own plug?
Well,
we can always edit it out. Yeah, go ahead.
All right.
Go ahead.
Very, very quickly, tomorrow is my near perfect spouse, Claire's 50th birthday, and she makes me better than I am. So thank you.
I love that.
Happy birthday, Claire.
We're going to keep, we'll keep that in for sure.
What a smart man you are. Oh, you get 3 gold stars for me. That's wonderful. Okay. Anybody who wants to celebrate their spouse or their partner.
Any shout outs? This is shout out moments.
Okay. Well, I'm having a good time in COVID.
I love my family.
Yeah, you love your family. And I'm having a good time in COVID
love family.
Because of my partner.
Oh, nice.
There you go. Okay, let's say
we see a hand from your partner.
Oh,
at least we know there's a hand.
Okay, here we go. Peter is being introduced.
Hi, Peter.
I came to visit Peter a year ago, 2 days before COVID shut down, and I didn't go home.
Now that's a guest.
And it's working out very well. So
nice.
I want everybody to be safe.
I did have a question that related to COVID-19 and how it affected individuals. So we have some context of you.
That's right.
Absolutely.
I'm not complaining.
Okay.
Nice.
So, nice to meet you, Peter. Thank you for sitting in and supporting.
Okay.
Have a good night, and we'll be in touch.
Very much, Greg. Thanks, Jim. Thanks, Barbara. Bye, Peter. Thanks.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye.
All right. Good night.
Bye.